And Duncan, are there changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Public comment? Hearing none. Our first item, continuity of operations, or better known as COOP, and our short message service SMS notifications discussion with Tiffany Westbrook from OEM.
So for the record, Tiffany Westbrook with Kootenai County Emergency Management. Over the past year or so, our office has been helping to facilitate the COOP update for the county. This was the first time we have taken this on internally, and I want to give a lot of kudos to Sarah Long, our preparedness planner, for helping us achieve that. These plans can run around $150,000, so the ability for us to do this in-house is a huge deal. Part of that process has been us working with the elected officials and department heads, because the purpose of the COOP plan is really twofold. It's to provide continuity of government during emergencies and disasters, and provide for continuity of operations of essential functions and services to Kootenai County citizens during any situation that might take us out of that normal function. So through doing this, she worked to create the continuity of operations plan, and it really is kind of broken up into two parts. So the base plan of the COOP describes concepts and functions of COOP operations and how they apply to Kootenai County. And then the departmental annexes, the one she's been working with the elected officials and department heads on, is really the detailed COOP instructions that outline the essential functions for your department. So for example, the clerk has different essential functions than the sheriff does. The county commissioners have different essential functions than the coroner, vice versa. So us working with you to understand what those essential functions that need to be carried out during an emergent situation, and how we can have those conversations to make sure that those services and functions are sustained during any situation that might take you out of your normal operations. So if there's an impact to your facility, if you need to have staff work from home, what functions can you provide remotely? What functions do you need to have people in office to access network or filing systems, what have you?
That was a big update we actually found, is that since the last update to the COOP, we all realized that a lot of us could work remotely because of how the pandemic affected us, and so being able to incorporate that really helped.
Yeah, so Sarah kind of worked with the departments and elected officials to identify those, and we made those updates. One of the important things, and you'll kind of get through my short little presentation on these things, is that while OEM is a facilitator and we help facilitate these plans developments, the information provided for these plans has to come from your departments, because you are the ones who understand your functions. We do not. So if you look at your COOP plan and you don't feel that it is reflective of your department and what you do and what you need to do to sustain those operations, please have a conversation with us, because we don't have that subject matter expertise to understand what the treasurer needs to sustain his operations and vice versa. So Sarah made a lot of attempts to work with all of you, and that plan was recently adopted a month ago or so.
A week ago or two.
And that will go through an annual revision process. So on an annual basis, she'll be reaching out to all of you to ask, has anything changed? Is there any changes in facilities, staffing, anything that might impact your COOP plan, and make those edits. An overhaul will occur every 5 years, where we kind of do a more detailed dive. But I think it's important that you at least are aware of the plan and you have the conversation with your staff about the plan. As we took this on in-house, we actually condensed this plan from originally almost 500 pages down to a little bit over 200. So we really tried to simplify, condense, and make it actionable, and that's kind of been our goal with all of the plans. We want to strip away kind of some of the redundancies or the fluff and make it meaningful for you. So as I mentioned, the departmental annexes consist of three main things. So the essential functions, like I've touched on, what matters to you, public safety, what are your mandated services that you need to sustain regardless of the exigent circumstances because of a disaster or emergent situation, and then the planning scenarios, which Sarah can touch on a little bit.
The planning scenarios we've taken from the previous COOP plan. It's pretty much just broken down into 4 different scenarios. The first one, you can see it in the plan as well. It kind of goes into it more in depth, but it's just for small incidents in the office, like a water leak. The scenario number 2 is more for like if the building is affected and the whole building needs to either work in a different facility. The third scenario is if the general area is impacted, so whether due to like a fire or a flood. And then 4 is just more regionally, or like how we had the pandemic, if it's just a larger scale and it's not so specific to a location. And in that same conversation, we also talk about identifying the alternate facilities, and also if we do need to work remotely, that is now identified as it was not in the previous COOP.
And then when you're having those conversations, do you have the infrastructure to work remotely? So have you talked with IT to make sure your staff have that capability rather than waiting for a pandemic and all of us trying to figure out, oh crap, everybody needs that capability? We're having those conversations prior. So, and an example, like when community development had that flood situation, this would be a situation where you talk about your COOP and your ability to kind of think about how else can we function to still achieve the same standards that we need to, despite the circumstances that we're currently living in. And lastly, it kind of details your vital systems and records. So it's going to talk about if the clerk needs a specific software to carry out a specific function, what is that software? Are there alternatives? Should there be an issue with that? We did talk with IT pretty heavily on this because cybersecurity, as I'm sure you're all aware, is a continued hot topic, and we need to really think about how do we carry out the things that we have become dependent on IT infrastructure if we don't have that ability. Something as simple as dumping off trash at solid waste. Do we have a redundancy if the computer system's down over there to collect those funds or to send out invoices or what have you? So that's kind of what you should be thinking about with your department as you're looking at it and kind of thinking about it through that lens of, I know what I do every day, but how do I do what I do every day if it was impacted by X, Y, or Z? So you don't have to go catastrophic, but you can kind of start to think about small things can have a trickle-down impact. So the review process, I kind of talked about. These updates will happen on an annual basis. Sarah will send out a review email to each of you. You will kind of have that conversation, review it with your staff, and provide us with any updates. Elected officials, departments, and OEM all have a role in this. The reason we have two little red boxes there is because OEM, we're going to provide updates for OEM's annex. I'm going to train my staff to OEM's annex. OEM, am not training the treasurer or the clerk to theirs because that is your responsibility to have buy-in. And when I come back to the plan is only as good as the information provided, that's really where I sit with that. If I don't know your functions, I can't train your staff to those, and there's nobody else better to know your functions than you and have that buy-in and get your staff to start thinking in that way. So again, the annual review process, updates, anything changes. This is a living document. We can put changes in at any time. But on that 5-year mark, we'll be doing a more detailed dive. I think it would be smart to maybe talk with your staff and maybe have somebody kind of be the point person for COOP in your department so then they can be the rally point to go, hey, this changed, or hey, we need to talk about this, or hey, we need to have a 10-minute COOP conversation about what to do in our department if X, Y, or Z happen. Just small little things. It doesn't have to take up months and hours and days of your week, but just little conversations here and there to keep you and your staff a little bit more prepared. So then we're going to bleed a little bit into emergency campus plans because this was something that was recently put on my plate, and we've had this conversation multiple times. But the biggest thing that's changed and is different with the campus emergency plans is we now have a facilities director. So I think that's been the missing piece in a lot of this because, as I mentioned with the COOP previously, I facilitate plan development and I can help you guys get those plans developed and I can put committees together, but the actionability of the plan kind of lies at the foot of the facilities or the departments that live in that facility. So we have started to have this conversation and it'll bleed into that SMS a little bit, but these are all the campus plans we currently have. One of our desires through this is to simplify these plans. So currently the plan content is broken up into these essential parts. So we have roles and responsibilities, who is responsible for what at what facility. Then we have evacuation and rally points. We work with facilities around like the courthouse campus and get MOUs in place. So if we needed to evacuate during inclement weather and they can't stand outside, this is the space they can go to. It also discusses the notification process, which did update a couple years ago when we switched to KC Notify, which is the internal county alerting system that we utilize through Everbridge, which is our alert notification process. On the public side is referred to as Alert Kootenai. On the internal side, it's referred to as KC Notify. And then the emergency guidance, and Sarah can break that down a little bit for you.
The emergency guidance is the thing that's actually the consistent aspect throughout all of these plans. It's all about if there's a fire in the building, what to do, if there's a bomb threat, if there's any type of active threat, it provides the instructions to each department on what to do. And that is pretty much the same throughout every plan. And so that's kind of what we want to start bringing into this new process on how to streamline that, because if that's what's consistent, we really only need to make some type of section for the things that are different for every department, such as the roles and responsibilities, notification, rally points, and so.
Yeah. So as we work on simplifying these plans, we have a few objectives that we're going to really leaning in on. Our goal here is to simplify the existing plan. So this is an existing plan. This is noxious weeds, parks and waterways.
little
And you can see
hefty.
it's a little hefty. It's a little content dense. So our goals here is with working with Jonathan for the SMS notifications, knowing we have a new facilities manager, facilities director, and then any individuals within your department who you might think would be beneficial to have on this committee. We'd really like to set up a campus plan safety committee to drive campus plan needs and facilitate in the simplification of the plans. We do have some examples, so we reached out, and there's these nifty little books that you can hang in your departments that have tabs and show things.
It's all that emergency guidance.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. So we do have some ideas to talk to them about. The other big objective here is this conversation. I've been with the county a little over 6 years now, and we have consistently been discussing the need for frequencies for drills and exercises, because a plan is only as good as the amount of times it's talked about, exercised, and drilled to. And so now having a facilities director kind of getting the facilities on a schedule of a frequent fire drill, or just to make sure that we're going through the motions of it and to minimize the chaos if something were to happen. Our third objective really is we've had a lot of movement throughout the county, so we need to have plans that reflect the new facilities needs and the movement that's occurred, and also, like I've mentioned, work with the facilities director to determine safety needs. I know he has a background working with schools, and schools really lean in on safety needs, so I think that there's some really good conversations to be had about maybe some security assessments or safety assessments, maybe alarm systems for the facilities, and then of course working with our law enforcement partners to determine what we can do to keep the safety of our employees as our number one goal. And then our fourth objective, which will bleed me into the SMS, is we want to familiarize staff with KC Notify. I know if you are a subscriber of Alert Kootenai, we do quarterly drills to the public for them to see those alerts coming through. We want to get on some sort of notification process drill with that as well, so staff know what the KC Notify looks like and how that internal notification system will come through. So currently, as we're working through this, the SMS alerting, if an incident were to occur, we're going to set up a communication team that is trained within Everbridge. Currently, Sarah and I are trained in Everbridge to send out alerts to the public side and also the internal side, and so is dispatch. We want to get some more team members trained in that ability, like Jonathan with communications, because it really kind of would help supplement that effort. That message is compiled based off of the information and need, and then the alert is sent through KC Notify to specific locations. We have groups built in KC Notify based off of the facility. So like there's a campus plan, there's a courthouse campus group, there's an OEM office group, there's a sheriff's office group. So we would send the alert to the impacted area. And then subscribers of KC Notify receive that alert. Currently, when employees are onboarded with the county, they actually fill out a little form about where they want their text or emails to go to for KC Notify, and there is also an opt-out. We receive all of these, and then we input them into the system, and then as they exit the county, we delete them from the system. There is a little bit of lag there because we started doing this, and we've kind of really got this process ironed out and working for us probably in 2021-ish. So the biggest gap in people subscribed to KC Notify are your long-term employees who've been with the county. So I think if we start to do those drills more frequently, we'll be able to identify who isn't actually registered, who wants to be, and we can put that information in and get them in the system. So that's really all we had for you. I know that might have been boring, but I think safety is really important, and the reality is we kind of drive that for our county, and we need to keep in mind our employees and all of these things. So if we know we have a gap, which we do, we have a gap in the amount of drills and exercises and the familiarization with these plans, we really need to kind of take that to heart and have conversations about how we can fix that capability gap and work to improve it. We're here as emergency management to facilitate these conversations and drive these conversations, but as I've mentioned, and I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, the effective and efficiency of the products we develop is dependent on the buy-in from everybody in this room. So I would just, if you have questions for us, please let us know, but I think we'll probably work with Jonathan and Jeff at getting that safety committee set up, and if you have somebody in your respective department who you want to sit on that, please let us know and we'll involve that, and then with whatever product we develop out of that committee, we will obviously run it by the elected officials and then present it to the board for approval. And with that, I'm done.
Questions for Tiffany? Any thoughts on this? I'm excited. We talked about drills quite a bit in the last year, and then we had 2 that weren't drills, so that was awesome. So yeah, I'm excited to get Jeff on board and get through this. And this is timely because here comes winter, and
Right.
I think 90% of all of our stuff happens between October and March.
Windstorms.
Yes.
Heavy snowfall, all of
Yeah,
it.
flooding.
Yep.
So
We're out of the fire season, but
Hopefully.
I don't know.
exactly.
I have a question. So one of the things that I remember from the not a drill was, we're sitting in the garage and like nobody really knew it was over, and then Alana just happened to drive over and she's like, "What are you guys doing here?" Building's open. With the KC Notify, would that tell us?
Yeah, so we would need to close the loop. So
Right.
as we work to develop that communications, identify those members who could get that information, and then once we got the all clear from law enforcement and whoever, we could push that out and close the loop to allow people to return to the office. Or if that message was the facility is going to remain closed for the duration of this event and the rest of the day, please go home, we could also push that out. So we just need to talk about what
Trigger
that process
points.
looks like,
Yep.
and then start training to it. But definitely.
Anything else? All right. Item 2, administration building, 2nd floor station deputy. We've had them on and off, but it seems like KCSO staffing levels have been more off than on lately. So I just wanted to get the people in this building, and of course, Stan, you're welcome to chime in on how we feel about that being empty. And we don't necessarily have to fill it with a deputy. Could be a security officer. It could be something else. So I just wanted to start that conversation to see who had, concerns, or, do we need to address that? So, Dyson.
I would say kind of the biggest concern of not having anybody up there would be the DMV. We have had quite a few people who have been aggressive or kind of an issue, and we end up having to call the police in to handle those situations. We've talked to staff about it a couple of times, and kind of they were gun shy about calling the non-emergency line or calling for extra help. So we had an internal conversation with the DMV. So if there's a question about it, I'd rather have them call and be safe. But they were uncomfortable when we didn't have somebody upstairs that they could call. So we've kind of worked out a better system where they'll call out more, but that does mean that we're calling more resources down to the DMV. Would be the only thing I have to add.
I would like to support what Dice. This is Bela. Can I speak?
Yes.
I think the key issue is response time, and by having somebody on site, we can reduce the response time and almost have an immediate response, assuming the deputy is not preoccupied. So I would make the request that we find a way to fill that spot and continue on with having a deputy there.
Can you quantify this issue that you have? I mean, how often are you getting this? 3-4 times a day, 3-4 times a week, 3-4 times a month? Just so we can understand, because it's expensive to pay a deputy to just sit there.
I recognize that, and I don't have a quantity. I do know that our manager of the DMV, they have some records that they can probably pull together. These are random events. We don't know when they're going to occur. I think safety is foremost. But no, I can work on trying to get some quantify a number for you, but I have nothing to provide you at this point.
Yeah, I think that sorry, real quick. From my perspective, Assessor Kovacs, the more you can quantify an issue, the easier it is to make a decision. The anecdotal stories, while I understand they play a role, the actual metrics, the numbers tell us how much of a need there is, where to put our resources. Thank you.
No, and I agree with you. I agree with you on that. The hard part is to put a number on the safety that your staff feel and that they perceive. I mean, we can quantify it, and I understand that ultimately it comes down to numbers and justifying costs. But if we have staff that feel like they're not safe, then we have people calling in sick, and we have other problems that develop.
Well, I think we don't have. This is Bill Brooks. I don't think the problem is that big, because the people over in Post Falls do a great job handling all the instances where people quote become aggressive. But I don't know that we have anybody feeling quote unsafe. That is a catch-all phrase that I reject. When we have a deputy upstairs in the second floor, they can get down there. But if there's really a crisis, that's not going to do a lot of good. Judging by do they feel safe, we should have somebody sitting in each DMV, and we just don't have those kind of resources, nor do we need to commit those kind of resources to that. It's making it more complicated than it is.
Steve, Jill, anything to add? Because you guys handle substantial.
We can count incidents where we've requested assistance on one hand each and every year, probably substantially less than that. I echo some of the concerns that Bela and Dyson have mentioned. It sometimes does rise to the level of, being a little bit sketchy, but the frequency of actually needing someone there to help settle an issue is once or twice a year, and it's usually around the tax collection time.
I think we had somebody here during tax collection.
Right, and what we've asked in the past, and I think it's worked out well, is that if we have a deputy in some years, we've had them for the full week, but at least the few days around, collection time would be ideal.
Right. Jennifer?
I think with county assistance, basically with getting rid of the medical side of it, we haven't maybe had as many issues as we did previous years. I probably agree with Steve during collections, because I've seen his office have issues, but I think it is about resources, and we've taken some action in our county assistance clerk's office to make sure people feel secure in their offices too. But I think it's a matter of what kind of resources we have in the county.
All right, so it sounds like no appetite to move forward with any requests. Maybe you can just get us a list of dates that you would like somebody here.
If I could, it's not that there's not an appetite. It's that if you don't quantify the problem, what are we doing? It's all based upon, a story of, well, we've had some issues. I don't doubt the fact that if you're dealing with the public, you're going to have issues. That's just the law of probability says that. But if we don't quantify these issues, then we can't say, how much we really need to get. I mean, if you're having one issue a week down in the DMV, I would say we need to look at this. We need to figure out what's going on. Are we saying things to escalate people, or are we doing everything correctly? And they're just upset because they're just, at a higher state of angst over other things. But until we quantify this, I have a hard time saying, let's put resources to it. But if you want to track these things and provide an update on it, if you have enough issues or events, I am all for putting the resources there. But let's quantify it.
And driver's license is actually going to be the most. They're going to have the most.
Wherever.
Yeah.
But we should start quantifying these problems, because I've mentioned this before. We have these issues for the board where people come in and say we're overworked. We have not enough staff to do the job. I ask, well, how can you show us that? Don't tell us, show us. And that's where the conversation starts to get a little bit quiet. I think if we start focusing on showing the problems and less on telling people about the problems, we can put the resources where they need to be, and we can explain to the public especially that why we're asking for money and where those resources are going. We're just not doing that. And I would encourage that we at least start moving in that direction.
Okay.
The only thing I would do is clarify that it is infrequent in the DMV that we have something that rises to that level, and kind of the same thing with the treasurer's office. It's really around peak time when it's really crowded in the summer when we're having these issues pop up. People get frustrated and they're already not happy to come to the DMV, even though our DMV staff is doing an excellent job. But I would say, maybe once every 6 months I have something that hits my desk. As far as a frequency that concerns me or that we need to involve outside authority, just for some clarity.
I believe I know the answer to this, but the actual jurisdiction responsible for responding to an incident here on campus is the Coeur d'Alene Police Department, correct?
No.
It is not.
Inside the building is supposed to be the county. That's my understanding. Outside the building, yes, then that's when we call Coeur d'Alene. So if it's an arrest warrant inside driver's license, my understanding is Coeur d'Alene does not like to come here.
I understand they don't like to come.
Right, and so because they're long-time agreement, again, without any sheriff's representative here. That's been my understanding since I've been here. So that would be
I think we
need to qualify. Bela?
I think that's something we need to probably clarify for certain. I mean, if we're talking about a potential safety issue, we don't want to speculate. I mean, I think we probably need to get something clarified definitively between the sheriff's office and the police. My experience has also been that typically it's the city that responds. But what I think I hear you saying, Leslie, I think I hear you saying that in various past instances, the police department has refused to come or has said they don't want to participate inside the building. Is that correct?
Actually, our deputy's taking care of it. So it's just kind of been recently where we have not had a deputy full-time since I've been here. There's been stints, maybe a few weeks or a month, but this has been the longest time. And my understanding is we're not getting one. So that's kind of why this talk is happening. So yeah, it's easy enough to talk to driver's license, find out their numbers, and find out from the sheriff's department what the relationship is with Coeur d'Alene.
One other thing I like to throw out there for the commissioners or all the elected officials to consider is that when we did have a deputy in that role, one of the things that they did is they provided a lot of customer service to the public, which I think was very helpful to help people find their way into the right department, directing people where to go, what to do. She was very informative in the past. I know that probably is a different topic, but maybe we could take a look at possibly finding some sort of volunteer service where we could get members of the public to assist with directing customers. I think that would be very helpful to the community.
All right. Anything further on this topic? All right. Item 3, holiday closure schedule. A couple of different things. In your agenda is the list of Juneteenth and day after Thanksgiving holidays for 24. So it's in policy. We've requested that EOs and department heads give the Board of Commissioners in January who is going to be taking Juneteenth off versus the day after Thanksgiving. So if everything is the same as last year, that's great. Just let us know, and probably have the elected officials meeting in January, and we can readdress this. If that's the only topic in January, then likely we'll put it on an HR meeting and make sure that all the departments have reached out to us. Any questions on the holiday schedule? Was every department happy?
Leslie?
Yes, Bela?
Leslie, I do have a question. I'm not really understanding why we're talking about it now. Are you asking whether we should have an elected officials meeting in January? Is that your question?
No, I'm just reminding everyone that in January, the Board of Commissioners needs to know which departments will be closed on June 19th and which will be closed on the day after Thanksgiving.
Well, I thought we did that this year. I remember responding and providing our information for 2024. But my question is, why are we making it a decision every year? Why don't we definitively put it in writing as a matter of policy so that it's not an issue that we have to deal with manually every year.
It takes flexibility away from the elected officials, but if the elected officials agree that they want to do that, that's not an issue. We were giving it at least a couple
I'm not
years.
talking.
We were
Well,
giving
I'm not talking about taking flexibility. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
just giving it a couple years in order to make sure that each department is satisfied with what they choose. But if elected officials are saying, you know, that you don't want to do this every year, that's not an issue.
I see no issue with you routing this around like you've done. I appreciate the heads up. It's, as we all know, it's only been in existence for 3 or 4 years now? 2 years. So if you look at probably what has transpired over the last 2 years, I think the Treasurer's Office was the leader, thanks to Jill, to move from the Juneteenth to the after Thanksgiving, and that's because of the tax collection day of the 20th of June. And I see that more and more are doing that, probably for justifiable reasons. So I think another couple of years of figuring this out, as you've suggested, is probably appropriate.
Okay. Anyone else want to talk about this? Okay. So the other discussion point, and we don't have to have a decision today, but it would be regarding Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. These are both on Tuesdays. Past practice has been kind of all over the place now, where we would close campus and people had the ability to choose to take vacation to leave at 3 o'clock, or they could choose to stay and work those hours and not take it. We've had other boards say, we're closing at 3 o'clock, you don't have a choice, go home, but it's admin time with pay. So just starting this conversation before it is Christmas Eve. Stan, thoughts?
I don't know that I really have a comment. I think it's worth talking about. I don't mind leaving it in the department's choice. You know, I think if the employees are given the choice of working versus taking time off, you're going to have a situation where people might not have 2 hours to take off. So giving them the option to stay and work would be best. If the county is deciding that it's 2 hours of admin time, I don't think that's a decision for me to make, but I don't think there'd be any objection to that from the employee standpoint.
Okay, so technically I think it'd be 4 hours because I don't want to do something different for Christmas Eve than I do for New Year's Eve. So that I think that would cause confusion. To that point, we've also had departments who have allowed in the weeks prior to make up those 2 hours, maybe take half an hour lunches and be able to gain those 2 hours so they wouldn't have to use accruals. And it would be within the same pay period. So that's, yep, comp time. So I would prefer comp time or vacation rather than making it losing 4 hours of, paid time where the citizens are paying for 4 hours and they're not getting service for 4 hours. So that's why I would like to.
Is New Year's Eve a little bit different though, because you want people off the parking lot, right, by 3 p.m.?
I don't know. It was the lighting ceremony, so day after Thanksgiving, but that's no longer an issue. So I don't really know what the practice for New Year's Eve and Christmas Eve is.
Maybe it was Thanksgiving then.
Yeah.
I just think if you're telling people because of parking, that may be a different scenario versus Christmas Eve.
Yeah, so I really think that this is not any outside factors anymore because of so many departments taking Thanksgiving, day after Thanksgiving off. So I think this is just something that is kind to the families and employees and, with preparations and stuff, so.
In my office is still a little bit different, I think, arguably than most, because if the courts are operating, then my office has to be operating, so.
Yeah.
We might go to a skeleton crew, but we're still going to have some people in the office, in court and whatnot.
I have not cleared this with my boss, but IAC does these surveys every year, and one of the things that I've noticed is that holidays are not consistent from county to county. There are some counties with, 14 days, like some floating holidays. Would you consider just giving those 4 hours as a holiday? If people have to work, then it's treated the same as if they work on a holiday. Because to me, giving a couple of hours at Christmas and a couple of hours at New Year's is something that when someone is considering taking a job outside of the county for, 50 cents more an hour or $1 more an hour, it will, like for our team, having the day after Thanksgiving is huge. And giving that up now that they've had it, it's a decision. So it's just a thought.
Yeah, I think it would require a lot of analysis. So I don't know that, Sylvia, if you want to chime in.
For holidays, we've looked at it a little while back in terms of what other counties are doing related to holidays, and they're averaging about 11 to 12, and we're at 11. But we do see some giving a few hours, up to 4 hours on Christmas Eve, and then not. So I don't think I see it so much on New Year's Eve, but definitely Christmas Eve. And we're happy to reach out to our counterparts and get that information for you and bring it back on what to do with what they're doing with their holidays. But 11 to 12 is typical of the number of holidays that in Idaho they're giving.
Right, which I still hear complaints from citizens and taxpayers that we get so many. So I really don't want to, continue down that path. And I appreciate Jill's, talking about it, but I think we're pretty generous and with a lot of the stuff that we're trying to do. So, all right, anybody else, any thoughts? We just want to say, do we just want to keep it to Christmas Eve and not offer anything on New Year's Eve? So that's fine too.
Have we offered I can't remember. Have we offered New Year's Eve in the past?
I don't know.
I don't
remember.
believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then Christmas Eve, it sounds like we've kind of narrowed it down. So do we just want to leave the flexibility to do comp time, vacation time for those 2 hours? Okay, I'm seeing the clerk, yes. Dan kind of mentioned yes. Steve, Bela, Dyson's yes. Bruce?
I'm fine.
Are you asking us all the way in now?
I'm fine
Yes.
with what
Sorry.
people want to do. The fact is that we've done a lot, and we're trying to continue that. And I just want to make sure we don't get too much into the weeds on some of the stuff. If people have their time that they want to use, let them use it.
Mm-hmm.
But with the COLA, with the steps, I feel like we have done a pretty good amount. And typically these kinds of things are ways of showing appreciation. And I think ultimately what people get in their paycheck is the biggest form of appreciation, and they're getting that. So.
Yeah. And just the whole reason is the BOCC office will get no less than 24 calls between now and the holidays on what are we doing. So just wanted to get out in front of this so BOCC can issue a memo. So Bela, did you want to weigh in on this Christmas Eve?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I couldn't quite understand what you said. Did you say you get how many calls?
Probably a couple dozen.
Okay. I think the thing we should consider, I tend to agree with Bruce and what he said. I think we just need to keep in mind we want to make it manageable. We don't want to have to deal with a lot of different one-off type situations. It makes it very difficult, especially for the large departments, to have to manage through an exception in this case, an adjustment in that case for each different employee. I think we need to consider the cost of the effort in managing it.
Well, that'd be up to your office. If you just say you have to be here or take vacation, then that would be up to you. If you don't want to offer the comp time, that'd be up to you. If you don't want to, let them have vacation to leave early, you could do that too. So it's, again.
I totally agree. And I guess that's why I'm a little curious as to why we even need to discuss this. I mean, if each elected official can manage it, then that should be the answer. Allow them to manage it.
I would say, Bela, is because of payroll. I think we want to be consistent throughout the whole county. Technically, the board sets this admin pay. And so if the board wanted to pay people 2 hours, they could, but I think the board has to make the discretion. We can weigh in, but for payroll's sake, I think we want to either do the comp time or vacation so it's consistent amongst everyone.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Well, I think we're saying the same thing. I mean, if the board has an appetite for creating admin pay, then that's their decision. Are you just simply soliciting input from the electeds? Is that all this is about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Bill?
I tend to agree with Bruce.
Okay. Thank you, Bela. Bill?
I'm here. I think the departments are well run enough that they can make their own determination. I think that, for instance, the treasurer or the assessor have needs that are special that we can't and shouldn't try to make policy for. I also would point out that in almost 6 years there, I have received no calls from the public complaining about counting employees' attendance during holiday seasons.
Well, you're lucky, Bill. All right.
I would add one more thing, Leslie.
Yes.
I think, and Jill brought up a good
I just think I have a different constituency, Leslie.
The employees aren't your constituents?
No, I think my constituents in the county are not in the weeds in terms of the things that apparently concern your constituents.
Okay, Jennifer?
Just discussing with Jill, I think it's relevant because the board is the one typically that makes the decision to shut the admin building and other campuses. That are we going to say that the building's closing at 3? I think that needs to be clarified along with compensation or vacation time. So is the board making a decision to close this building at 3 on, we'll say, is it Christmas Eve?
Christmas Eve.
Sure,
Just Christmas Eve only, yes.
Okay.
I would suggest that Christmas Eve only. That's easy to justify to our patrons because likely nobody's coming in anyway. And yes, so I'm fine with that. So Bruce, is that your understanding? We'll close admin building at 3 o'clock Christmas Eve. We do not have authority to close any of the court buildings. So.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the last item is adverse employment actions procedures. Also in your packet here was a memo from the Board of Commissioners in November of 2020, and it was in direct response to ICRIM changing policies. But going back through this, I think that it would be helpful if we updated this policy and that we added a couple of best practice items, including parameters around admin leave. And so I just wanted to start that discussion. Sylvia, I don't know if you had anything to add there.
The admin leave would be something critical, whether it's with pay or without pay, because when you put someone on admin leave, there's the potential of adverse employment action to follow up. So it's better to have HR and legal in the loop than after that's been done. So really making sure that we concur with the departments, and most of the time we do. They're rare that we don't agree on whether they should go on admin leave with pay. And then, so set those parameters is important, and having legal and HR involved is critical.
Okay. So with that, I would just go to any elected official who wanted to give any suggestions for this, but I think HR can probably come up with a best practice, and the board can review it at a HR meeting. But is there anything that you want to see added to this kind of framework?
What about locking employees out of systems?
Right, so that would be in the best practice thing. So if you're considering these actions, then you need to go through HR and just let them know what's happening, because I know you guys get a lot of questions from people. So,
And separate from locking employees out of systems, taking away their access to the building.
Yes.
I think really it's going to be kind of broad. Anything that could be considered, construed as an adverse action against somebody, especially without notification, when they're just left to wonder why they're in that position. So, Stan, are you on board with that?
Oh, certainly.
Okay. All right. Steve? Good. Okay. Bela?
I have no further input.
Okay. Bill?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay. Bruce?
I'm fine, thanks.
Okay. All right. I think HR has direction. And with that, public comment. Okay. Hearing none. 9:48, meeting adjourned.